Namaste. We welcome you back to our continuing series on the life divine with Ranganath. At present, Narad is unable to join us due to the visa restrictions laid because of the pandemic. We are very happy to restart the series with Ranganath.
Welcome to everybody. We'll be continuing our series of talks on the life divine, which we left off about several months ago because of this COVID problem. And we had started the chapter on matter, and we were somewhere in the middle we stopped. But to make it more, it's logical, I think, to start again from the beginning of the chapter. So we'll start from matter. So before we go into the chapter on matter, I would like to tell you how Sri Aurobindo is developing his theme. Okay? The main idea in the life divine is in contradiction of the very generally spread idea all over India that if you want a divine life, it is not possible here on earth. There is too much of imperfection and perversion, and you have to leave the physical world and take your consciousness to the higher realms where you find the spirit pure. Okay? Pure spirit you find, nothing of you have to go to Purusha and not to Prakriti. You have to give up Prakriti. So this is the idea. So Sri Aurobindo is countering that idea, and whole life divine is nothing but establishing the possibility and the logical way you can connect the higher and the lower. So if you can connect the higher and the lower, it is possible to have a divine life on earth. That's his whole intention, and he has taken up, first he has gone into he has examined the four principles of Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda. Actually, he has got 3 chapters on it. Sat, the pure existent, conscious force, Chit, Shakti, and then Ananda. Then he now proceeds to establish the connection between the higher and the lower. And the connection is, I am telling you from before, which he will establish, Sat becomes matter. Sat is the subtlest of substance. It corresponds to matter when it descends into the lower hemisphere and becomes gross matter. Then he comes to conscious force. Conscious force is the energy and the consciousness. It becomes here the vitality and the prana. Okay. Universally it's the prana. Individually it is the vital in men. Okay. Then finally he goes to Ananda. Ananda becomes the psychic being, and supermind becomes the mind. This is what he will establish, and he has been establishing. He has first dealt with supermind and mind. He has established the connection, although they seem to be absolutely opposites. He also establishes the fact that the opposition that you see is apparent. It is not fundamentally something irreconcilable with each other. They are complementary aspects of each other. So he first establishes mind and supermind, then Chit Shakti, and then finally he is coming to matter. So Chit Shakti also is the prana. He establishes the connection, then finally he comes to matter. Matter also, there will be 4 chapters on matter. Okay? So you get lost. That's why I am giving you that this is the central theme and he is developing it, but he develops it over 10 chapters. So by the time you start, you have forgotten the intention. Okay, so this is what he is trying to do. So now the chapter on matter. Matter is the manifestation of Sat. Sat is the subtlest of substance, and here it is also translated very often as truth. Okay, so one has to understand that truth and substance is the same. Okay, because what is truth? That which exists and is, that which exists is truth. That which does not exist is falsehood. So, that which is in the physical world, most prominently that which is matter. That is Sat, corresponding to the highest level. Here it is very, very gross, and it's a substance with which you make things. But as you keep climbing in consciousness and go to the highest level of the spirit, it becomes subtle substance, which the divine uses for manufacturing the universe. Okay? I am using strange words like manufacture, creation. You can use the word creation. Okay? So we'll start the chapter on matter. All right? So This is the 24th chapter, matter. He arrived at the knowledge that matter is Brahman. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a gradation. The disciple asks his father, who is his guru, I want to know what is matter. So his father tells him, go think about it. And in those days, the rishi used to be served by the disciples, and he says, go and graze the cows and come back. After 1 year, he comes back, he has realized that matter is Brahman. Okay, so Annam Brahmeti, that's in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Then he says, go back again and think more. So he goes back again and realizes that prana also is Brahman. And it goes on like that until mana also is Brahman, and finally you go to the last level from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Okay? So I'm reading the first paragraph. We have now, he has discussed life before and established the connection between life in the physical world with conscious force, Chit Shakti at the highest level. That he has done. In the beginning of each para, he usually summarizes what he has said earlier, and in the last para of the chapter, he gives you a hint of what he is going to do in the next chapter. Okay, so here he is summarizing somewhat. We have now the rational assurance that life is neither an inexplicable dream nor an impossible evil that has yet become a dolorous fact, but a mighty pulsation of the divine all existence. We see something of its foundation and its principle. We look upward to its high potentiality and ultimate divine outflowering. But there is one principle below all the others which we have not yet sufficiently considered, the principle of matter, upon which life stands as upon a pedestal, and out of which it evolves like the form of a many-branching tree, out of its encasing seed. The mind, the life and body of man depend upon this physical principle. And if the outflowering of life is a result of consciousness emerging into mind, expanding, elevating itself in search of its own truth in the largeness of the supramental existence, yet it seems also to be conditioned by this case of body and by this foundation of matter. The importance of the body is obvious. It is because he has developed or has been given a body and brain capable of receiving and serving a progressive mental illumination that man has risen above the animal. Equally, it can only be by developing a body or at least a functioning of the physical instrument capable of receiving and serving a still higher illumination that he will rise above himself and realize not merely in thought and in his internal being, but in life, a perfectly divine manhood. Otherwise, either the promise of life is cancelled, its meaning annulled, and earthly being can only realize Satchidananda by abolishing itself, by shedding from it mind, life and body, and returning to the pure infinite. Or else, man is not the divine instrument. There is a destined limit to the consciously progressive power which distinguishes him from all other terrestrial existences. And as he has replaced them in the front of things, so another must eventually replace him and assume his heritage. This idea that if man cannot do what he has to do, reach the highest level, another race will come and replace him. Just like man has replaced the animal has become static at its own level. Man also, if he can't do that and remains static at his own level, a new race will come and replace him, just as man has replaced the animal. This is the whole idea. But it has to be always based on matter. There should be no rejection of matter. That's the whole idea. So, okay? So, I can do one thing. I can read out to you, in other words, what he has said in this para. And if there are any questions, you can go into each question separately. Okay? So what he has said in this para, like this. What I am reading is not in the text. It is a summation that I made of the paragraph. Okay? So, we have seen that life is neither a mysterious dream nor a permanent evil, even if it looks like a painful fact. When you are in the physical world, you see that life is always full of perversions. The vital is full of desires and imperfections and all sorts of wrong emotions. All these things are there in life. But actually that's only a seeming. It's not a reality. Okay? Because the highest has come down to the lowest, it has subjected itself to limitation and also distortion. That's the whole idea. Highest coming down comes down from the purest of pure substance into the density of the darkness and density of matter. So, to understand this principle of manifestation from the highest to the lowest, think of the sea. Okay? At the higher level, if you go down, if you are swimming in the sea and go down 1 meter or so, you look up, you will see light. But as you keep going down more and more, two things happen. One is the light becomes less and less and the density increases until finally at the rock bottom of the sea, total darkness and such heavy density that a human body cannot go there. You have to go there with a suit. Otherwise you will get crushed. Okay? So this is very similar to the spiritual fact of Satchidananda coming down and manifesting itself in the lowest level of existence. That's why it becomes here absolutely dense and even distorted. That which was light on top becomes here darkness. That which was pure consciousness here seems to become, there is a connection, seems to become unconsciousness. That which was pure delight, ananda, takes on three forms here: pleasure, pain and indifference. Okay? So, you must keep this idea very clearly in your mind. This gradation. If this gradation is clear, many things become clear to you. But you must remember the gradation. There is another question of why it should reduce itself. That is because of manifestation. When you want to manifest something, you have to limit what you want to manifest. If I have a thought in my mind and I don't speak it out, it is unmanifested. But if I have to express my thoughts and manifest them, I have to use words, which means I am limiting my thoughts to words. Okay? So there is a limitation. So limitation is necessarily a concomitant of creation and manifestation. That is why there is this distortion that occurs. Okay? So I go back to the text. We have seen that life is neither a mysterious dream nor a permanent evil, even if it looks like a painful fact. Life is in fact a vast creative beating of the very heart of the all existence. The all existence is the Sat. You can speak of it as that which exists is Sat. So you can think of it, because to think of existence is not very easy. It's a sort of abstract concept. Think of it as a substance, but absolutely the subtlest possible substance. Ether, you can think of ether. Ether, air, fire, water, earth. There is another way of explaining the gradation. Okay? Ether is the subtlest. In fact, it is so subtle that there are some philosophies which say there is nothing there. Okay? Even science does not admit the existence of ether. Air, slightly denser, you can even feel it. Fire, you can start even seeing. Water, you can even taste. And finally, you have earth. Okay? So, which is this grossest. So, this gradation, remember. Okay? So, what he's saying now, life is a fact, a vast creative beating of its own heart, of the very heart of the all existence. It is the substance which is, he said, they use the word pulsation. I have used the word beating. It's a pulsation. All energy is a pulsation. Okay? Think of everything you will see that it's a pulsation. There is a rhythm in the physical world. Okay? Life is a vast creative beating of the very heart of the all existence. We have also sensed that its truth is in Chit Shakti, in Sat Chit Ananda, and we may look forward to its ultimate outflowering on earth. So there is an evolution on earth, and from matter has come out life, and from life has come out mind. So we can expect that even the supermind, which is the highest level, will come out here, and life will find its fulfillment in Chit Shakti. It will reveal its divinity at a certain stage when the evolution proceeds further. That is what he is saying. Okay? Then, but we have not yet examined the principle of matter in which life finds itself rooted. Life is rooted in matter and mind is rooted in life. Okay? It's like my Russian friends gave me a Russian doll. Okay? So it's a doll with removable head. You remove the head and the same doll in a slightly smaller size is there inside.
Called Matushka.
Then you remove that head, again there is a smaller one. So this is the inherence. Matter contains life in itself. You will not see it, but it is there. And you remove, and mind is contained in life. And in mind also is contained the supermind. So it's a sort of compressed, like a collapsible telescope, it is there, and in evolution, one by one, in evolution it is coming out. So this is what is expected, that nature has already revealed life in matter, it has revealed also mind from life, and now out of supermind will come out of mind will come the supermind. So this is what he is saying. So at that time, life will be fulfilled, matter will be fulfilled, and the mind also will be fulfilled. What will be the fulfillment of mind? Right now we have ignorance, it will become full of knowledge. What will be the fulfillment of the vital, which is energy? It will become pure energy, omnipotence it can get. What will be the fulfillment of the body? The body is now something very gross and something limited. It has got disease and limitation. So all this will disappear and life will be full of health and capacities which don't exist now in the body. Okay? So that will be the fulfillment. So that's what he's saying. But we have not yet examined the principle of matter in which life finds itself rooted. Matter is a pedestal upon which life and mind take support and evolve upwards. Man's life, mind and body depend on matter. Its importance is therefore obvious. Even as man rises in consciousness, it is clear that the body too must become capable of housing the spirit's subtle but powerful inflows of consciousness, force and ananda. The body must become capable of retaining the consciousness and the flow of ananda that comes into it. Right now, that is not possible. It is the experience of many yogis. When you are not ready and there is a descent of consciousness and force into you, there is fear and there is also rejection. Okay? You reject, you don't want it. You are very comfortable with your limitations. Okay? So, this also, some people have told me who have experienced it. When the light is descending into you, you become afraid because it's something so different from your normal consciousness. And they want to even reject it. They don't even want it if there is too much of imperfection. That's why you have to prepare yourself. You have to prepare your body, you have to prepare your vital, and even your mind. If you are more or less prepared and purified, there will be no rejection. But if you are not purified and not ready, there will be a tendency to reject it. Even fear can come in to that extent. Okay? So, if the body cannot do this, become capable of receiving the divine forces without flinching. If the body cannot do this, become capable of receiving the divine forces without flinching or failing, then the divinization of earthly life will be impossible. And the only hope for the spiritual life will be the soul's escape from the powerful downward hold of matter. Gravitation is a physical fact, but it's also a spiritual fact. The lower is always pulling you down. Your body and the vital is pulling you down. Even the mind gets affected by the pulling down, the gravitational pull of the body and the vital. So, when the higher comes down, the lower must be ready to receive it without getting disturbed. Okay? If that is not possible, Swamiji is saying, the ascetic is right. The ascetic rite, you have to give up this place. It's impossible for the body to receive the divine consciousness, you have to go up. But the body will be capable. So Abdul is saying, your body, mind, life will be capable of dividing, and that's exactly what we are doing now. He will establish the connection between matter and Sat. That's what he will do in this chapter. Not chapter, 4 chapters on matter. Okay? So, if there are any questions, we'll go or we'll start reading the second paragraph. Any questions? Anandi?
You talked about the manifestation being limited because once something unmanifests comes into existence, for example, we need to express through words.
Okay. That problem of manifestation and the limitation, that's the problem.
Limitation.
Okay.
So,
I'll explain in another way. Okay?
my question is, if the life divine is to manifest on earth,
Yes.
does it mean that new forms of manifestation or new channels of holding that manifestation need to be prepared?
No, the lower will prepare itself for the manifestation of the higher. Okay? So, let me explain. First of all, there is matter. No? But matter, there is no life in it. Right in the beginning, only matter existed. Life came up 1 million years afterwards, after matter. So matter had to be made ready, and when it was made ready, life could manifest in it. Similarly, mind also came out of life maybe 1 million years afterwards, because the matter, the life element also had to be made ready. And what is meant by the life is made ready? First of all, there were worms and caterpillars. But a worm and caterpillar is not capable of thought. So, matter and life have to combine themselves and produce something which will be capable of housing thought. And what is that? The brain. So, slowly, from the lowest level of matter, lowest level of life, it has to evolve, and evolution, nature has to produce a substance of matter which will be capable of housing thought. Okay? Did you understand what I am saying?
Yes.
So, that is not possible in the worm and the caterpillar. But the cat and the dog is partly possible to do that. When you come to the chimpanzee, he is capable of very elementary thinking. Okay? But when man comes into the picture, thought at its highest power gets manifested because he has a brain. And what is the brain? It is nothing but matter. But it is matter made ready so that it can receive the principle of thought. Exactly in the same way, the body, mind, life has to be made ready so that it can receive the divine consciousness in it. It will take time. That's what yoga is all about. You start preparing your body, mind, life so that the divine consciousness can come in without your flinching. He's used the word flinching. Did I make myself clear? Okay. Now there is the other factor of the manifestation, why it has to become distorted, and why there is a diminution, but there is also a distortion that occurs. Okay, so another way of explaining it is like this. Okay, suppose I am a potter. Okay, and I have a huge amount of clay, infinite amount of clay, which I want to make forms out of that. Okay, so the divine has got subtle substance. Okay, and he has to manifest that. So if I am a potter, pots and pans are inherent in clay, but it is not yet manifested. So if I want to manifest those forms of pots and pans from the clay, what do? I have to take a small amount and give it a form. Right? So when I am taking a small amount, a limited amount from the infinite clay, what am I doing? I am limiting. So limitation is necessary for manifestation. Okay? So when you are limiting something, naturally it becomes less than qualitatively it becomes less than the infinite. So the finite is less than the infinite, but it is every finite essentially the same as the infinite. So it seems to be limited, but actually it is not. There is no limitation in the infinite. The infinitesimal, sorry. Okay? There is a connection between the infinite and the finite. So it seems to be, when we are here at this level, with our senses, when we are seeing, we see life as a perversion. There is a lot of imperfection in it. There is a lot of dirt in the vital. But that's only a seeming. It can become that. Okay. Another way of explaining that is take the light. Okay. At the highest level, God creates light. But is He going to create light only in one intensity? He is infinite. So He will start creating light in all the intensities possible, because He is infinite. He is not satisfied only with one intensity. So He will, let me go, say 100 watts. Okay. But He will not stop there. He will make 200 watts, 500 watts. Look at the sun. Huge amount of energy and light. Okay. So similarly, He will go downwards also. So you come from 100 watts to 50 watts to 0 watts. Then it goes into the infinite negative also. Okay. So in other words, light and darkness are really the same thing. Essentially. But the form has changed. Okay. Another way of explaining this is, take water, okay? It can be made solid, it can become ice, but it can also become water vapor. So if someone doesn't know that water vapor, water and ice are the same thing, he will feel that these are three different things. But actually they are not, they are the same, essentially the same. So the form changes, the essence remains the same. So spirit actually becomes matter here, okay? That's why manifestation, there is a limitation, but that limitation is a seeming limitation. Matter has got the capacity, it has to develop and make itself ready for the divine consciousness. But if it can't do that, Sri Aurobindo says, the ascetic is right and we have to go up only. Okay? But according to Sri Aurobindo, the ascetic is not right, because nature has already revealed that there is an evolution. From gross matter, you have got life and you have got mind. Why should it stop there? It can go even to the next level. Okay? So, now we go to the next para. Alright? It seems indeed that the body is from the beginning the soul's great difficulty, its continual stumbling block and rock of offense. Therefore, the eager seeker of spiritual fulfillment has hurled his ban against the body, and his world disgust selects this world principle above all other things as an especial object of loathing. He hates the body because of its limitation. The body is the obscure burden that he cannot bear. Its obstinate material grossness is the obsession that drives him for deliverance to the life of the ascetic. To get rid of it, he has even gone so far as to deny its existence and the reality of the material universe. Most of the religions have put their curse upon matter and have made the refusal or the resigned temporary endurance of the physical life the test of religious truth and of spirituality. The older creeds, more patient, more broodingly profound, not touched with the torture and the feverish impatience of the soul under the burden of the Iron Age, did not make this formidable division. They acknowledged earth the mother and heaven the father, and accorded to them an equal love and reverence. But their ancient mysteries are obscure and unfathomable to our gaze, who, whether our view of things be materialistic or spiritual, are alike content to cut the Gordian knot of the problem of existence with one decisive blow, and to accept an escape into an eternal bliss or an end in an eternal annihilation or an eternal quietude. The language is very terse, so we have to go into and also give the references of what he is saying. He speaks in a very general way, so we have to go and look at all. We'll do that now. So, So now he is telling you what the problem of why the ascetic is running away from the physical world. Because the body is so gross, it cannot house the higher consciousness. It pulls down the vital, it pulls down the mind also, does not allow it to function fully. So this is the problem. We cannot understand that fully, but when the consciousness goes out, then you clearly see that the body is a huge drag on your aspiration, on your wanting to go above the limitations of body-mind life. That time we realize it. Okay? So, it seems indeed that the body is from the beginning the soul's great difficulty, its continual stumbling block and rock of offense. Okay? It offends against the spiritual life. Therefore, the eager seeker of spiritual fulfillment has hurled his ban against the body. Note the language. He has banned it, but it's not gentle ban. He has hurled the ban. Like he wants to throw it away. Okay? The language is always very interesting. You must look at that. Okay? So he has hurled his ban against the body, and his world disgust selects this world principle. What is the world principle? Matter. Above all other things, as an especial object of loathing, hatred. He hates the body because it is not allowing him to go into a spiritual consciousness. Okay? So, the body is the obscure burden that he cannot bear. In fact, to make that even more clear, even Ramakrishna used to say, why is there so much attraction to the body? Why are we paying so much attention to the body? In fact, Shakespeare also has a very interesting sonnet in which he says, why do we spend so much time beautifying the body and putting this and that? He uses the word, why paint the outward mansion so costly gay? That's the word he uses. Okay, so the outward mansion is the body, and we are spending a lot of time putting that into order. So, painting it costly gay. We are spending a lot of money and also making it appear very pleasant. Why do that? So, the ascetic does not want to do that. He rejects it altogether. Okay? So, the body is the so, I was telling about Ramakrishna. He says, what is the body? It is made of flesh, it is made of blood, it is made of even feces, okay? And the watery element which you are going to reject. So why are you attracted to this? It is made up of all these things which are rejectable. Of course, Sri Aurobindo does not agree with that because he says even the body is essentially divine and you must take care of it. You must not be attached to it, but you must take care of it. No rejection of the body. Okay? So, then the body is the obscure burden. We read that. And that he cannot bear. Its obstinate material grossness is the obsession that drives him for deliverance to the life of the ascetic. That's the reason why the ascetic rejects body-mind life and goes away. Goes away to the Himalayas or the cave or the forest and doesn't want to have anything to do with life. Okay? To get rid of it, he has even gone so far as to deny its existence. The Mayavadin says that matter doesn't exist. Okay, there is an element of truth in that, an intermediate truth, but that will come to later on. Okay, so to get rid of it, he has even gone so far as to deny its existence and the reality of the material universe. Buddhism also does that. The world is only an illusion. Don't pay any attention to it. Okay, so most of the religions have put their curse upon matter and have made the refusal or the resigned temporary endurance. Okay, if you don't want to say that is absolutely false, at least temporary endurance, you tolerate it for a certain amount of time until you get free. And have made the refusal or the resigned temporary endurance of the physical life the test of religious truth and spirituality. The older creeds, more patient, more broodingly profound. The older creeds, he is talking of the Vedic period in India, where there was no rejection of the material life. In fact, in the old Vedic period, there was great development in India, even of the life elements. There were 64 Shastras. Shastra dealing with everything, dancing, drama, even metallurgy, surgery, all these things were highly developed. There is even a Kama Sutra, okay? No rejection of the physical world. Even how to enjoy sex, there is a Shastra on it, okay? There is a Shastra for everything. Dance, music, everything. There is even the psychology of even how to steal. In other words, it is telling you no rejection of the physical world. Even everything can be perfected there also. So that's what he's saying, and he's using the word, the earth is our mother and heaven is our father. There is no rejection of either. Okay? So that is what has to be done. But now we have lost that. So I am reading that sentence again. The older creeds, more patient, more broodingly profound, they saw that the spirit and matter, the higher and the lower, are really one in essence. Different in form, but essentially one. Okay? Older creeds, more patient, more broodingly profound, not touched with the torture and the feverish impatience of the soul under the burden of the Iron Age. The Iron Age, he is referring to the modern age of machinery and things. So that's the Iron Age. Did not make this formidable division. The formidable division between God and the world, spirit and matter. They did not do that. They acknowledged earth the mother and heaven the father, and accorded to them, gave them an equal love and reverence. But their ancient mysteries are obscure and unfathomable. Now we have lost that sense of the oneness of the higher and the lower, we have lost. Okay? And in fact, even the Vedas, we have lost the meanings of Vedas. In India, we remember the Vedas as something divine, but nobody remembers what they really mean. And Sri Aurobindo had to try and get the secret of the Veda out. What is it? Is it really something very divine, or is it just ritualistic, religious rites? That's what the Westerners were, Max Muller particularly, that's what he said the Vedas are. Because it was couched in a language which could be interpreted as mere ritualistic rites. Religious rites. Okay. Then he is saying, but their ancient mysteries are obscure and unfathomable to our gaze, who, whether our view of things be materialistic or spiritual, are alike content to cut the Gordian knot of the problem of existence with one decisive blow, and to accept an escape into an eternal bliss or an end in an eternal annihilation or an eternal quietude. Okay. So he is referring to a Gordian knot. The Gordian knot that was the challenge that who had to face? I think if you go to the internet, you'll find, I think it was Alexander, or one of the Greek characters. I think it was Alexander, who had to untie the Gordian knot. The knot is so fast tied that he had to untie it, but he did not do that, he cut it. The ascetic is doing exactly that. He is cutting the link between spirit and matter. But Sri Aurobindo doesn't want to cut the link, he wants to untie it so that the connection between the higher and the lower is there. Okay? And the ascetic is doing exactly what should not be done, he is cutting the knot. And when you cut the knot, you escape from the lower and go into the higher. Okay? With one decisive blow, and to accept an escape into the eternal bliss or an end in an eternal annihilation or an eternal quietude. Okay, there are three things here he is talking about. Eternal bliss or an eternal annihilation and an eternal quietude. Okay, again three things. You can escape into the Ananda Loka. Okay, if you escape into the Ananda Loka, you will end up with the Vaishnava philosophy. The world is a play of the divine. Okay? Or if you go into the second one, eternal annihilation. The world you are eliminating and you are saying it is absolutely, there is nothing in it, it's illusion. You end up with Mayavada or Buddhism. Depends on how you see, what's your individual experience. Or an eternal quietude. That's it. Go to the self and you enter into a place where it is absolutely calm and quiet, the Advaita philosophy. So these three possibilities are there. if you reject the physical world and go to the higher level of consciousness. That is the solution for the pain of life. Buddhism is not wrong, but they stop at a place where there is no transformation of the lower. There is only an escape from the lower. So, Sri Aurobindo in many places he makes this distinction that there are three levels. At our level, the soul is prisoner of body, mind, life. But it has got the capacity to escape from it and go into the second level where you are now free. The soul is free. It is not subject to the limitations of body, mind, life. You are free. But you are static. You have no power over the lower. You are just a witness. You are watching and you are not affected. You are in peace and calm. That's a quietude he is speaking about. Okay? He is not yet speaking about the third level where you go up even higher than the self and then you have the power also to transform the lower. That's what he wants to do. So Sri Aurobindo wants to go to the third level. The materialistic man is happy at the lowest level. He accepts life and goes through the pain and suffering. Okay? He says that is part of life, I can't help it. But when you are dissatisfied with the materialistic life, like the ascetic, you go, you deny these and go to the higher level. Three possibilities, okay? He says that. Either you enter into Ananda if you are lucky, if you have a cosmic consciousness, you enter into bliss, you experience bliss also in the self. Or you experience a annihilation of the lower, Buddhism and Mayavada. Or quietude. Quietude, you enter into the silence of the self and you see the physical world as something separate from yourself. So these are the three solutions that can happen if you deny divinity of matter. Okay?